My whole life I've been really scared, like fearful. Like I'm a timid kid. When we got to America, I was terrified of everything and everyone. A couple days later, they actually sent an envelope with a bullet to our house, like our personal house, like my parents' house. And they were like, you gotta close it down. We're opening up Kinder Eggs. As I'm opening it up, the barbershop across the street just gets shot up. Founders think they're gonna be the big thing. I worked so hard. I worked so hard. I literally gave up everything in my life to code. Discipline sometimes kills creativity, right? If you're not uncomfortable and if your environment isn't changing, you get comfortable. And when you get comfortable, you're not creative. When you and your friends are all doing the same thing, and you're hopefully healthily competing about it, you end up becoming monsters.
Okay, Ali, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, bro. It's nice to see you in this setting. See you guys at the cameras. Nice to meet you, Vishal.
Definitely, you too.
So this is going to be a good one. You showed me around New York the first time I went last year. Now you're in SF, you're at Founders Inc. Vishal just got off a flight from Arizona. So this should be a good one.
Yeah, it's a spontaneous podcast. I mean, I've been to SF a bunch of times before. But I've definitely never been to this area, like in general. Like Frost, what's this army base called that we're in?
Fort Mason.
Fort Mason. Yeah. When the Uber got here, I was like, where am I? But the Founders Inc. Posters are very big. So it was nice.
We actually just got those this week.
Okay.
I was going to say those look dope. Those look really good.
So this is interesting because you started an agency last year.
Yeah.
Like a dev, like engineering agency. You did $500K in your first year. You dropped out of school before that.
Yep.
So to start us off, what's the dumbest thing you've ever bought?
Right. Dumbest thing I've ever bought. Honestly, the shirt I'm wearing right now was a really dumb purchase. And so this is like it's a brand called Burberry. And this was like the first thing I've ever bought, like for myself. Like literally the first shirt I've ever bought for myself was this shirt right here. I don't know if you want me to say the price, but it was not a good price. And like now a year later.
Can we guess?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
For that? I mean,
that's what I'm saying, bro.
Can it be more than $100?
Burberry, I'm going to say $450.
It's 100 above that for sure. It's like 550, yeah, which was the dumbest thing. But like me and my friends have like this obsession with Burberry, or used to like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I want to buy something that doesn't look expensive at all. Cause that's like the main thing whenever I bought stupid shit. It's like, I want to spend money on it for sure, but I don't want it to look expensive. And so like, that's why I got this shirt. Cause like you can't even, it's just literally a great shirt. It's just literally the definition of a dumb purchase, I'd say. And so like, yeah, I remember buying it too and like checking out for like what it was, like $600. And I went back home and I was like, it's literally just a gray shirt that you can buy from Express. But that's one of the things there's definitely more, like in terms of spending on experiences. Like I think like I once, the day I quit my job actually to start to full send the firm, we all went to a club in the city, like the first club, me and my friends. And it was completely spontaneous. And we ended up getting a table and I was like, all right, you know what? Like I quit my job today. Like I'll cover the table. How bad can it be? And that was like a couple thousand for like literally nothing. Like I don't even know what we ended up getting charged for. But that was like I still look at that transaction today and I'm like, I want that money back.
Are you a One Oak guy?
One Oak.
What's the club?
It wasn't a famous club. It was like a bad club. Like I think like the DSW, or I don't know, something like that.
The fact that you said under 10K, I was like, oh, I wonder. Because usually New York, you're going to get hit.
Dude, no, totally. But I'm not a degenerate like that with the money. It's more like I like good quality things. Okay. And this shirt's really good quality.
Right.
But that's it. Like I can dig into that more, but that's it.
Okay. So to take us back, like your story of growing up is very interesting.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You want to talk about it?
Sure. I'd love to. So yeah, I grew up in Iraq. I was born in 2000. So this was like right when the Iraq war was happening. And honestly, like I'm going to say this story as it is. I just want you guys to know I'm not like crazy affected, but like that's what's crazy about all the stuff I'm about to say. Like it just kind of happened right when I was a kid. But basically I grew up in Iraq. The way I lived was I lived at my dad's parents' house. And we had like 3 families in that house. It was like my dad's parents, my parents, and my dad's sister. We all lived in this big house. And it was pretty cool and chill, I think, for the first 3.5 years or whatever. But like then the war got really bad. And we had a couple of instances that were super threatening. And that's kind of what I'm gonna dig into. And we ended up leaving. But basically what happened was the two things I remember the most about being in Iraq are, one, we were taking a bus to Syria. And so like Iraq and Syria are somewhat close together, I think. I don't know the geography, but we were taking a bus there. And what happened was we were like in no man's land, like in between two countries. You're like driving a bus in the desert. It's mad sus, right?
It's like war dogs.
No, literally. And what happened was like this bus gets stopped, like from what I remember, bunch of people get on the bus with guns and AKs. They escort us all out. They make us sleep in the desert for a day. And they basically like took everybody on the bus hostage. And like the memories I remember from that, it's like sleeping on like green tarp. Like you guys know that green tarp we used to have in like in high school and stuff. They laid that out in the desert, made us all sleep on it. And as we were sleeping, I just remember all these attack dogs. Like attack dogs, I say that because I played Call of Duty a lot. Like, you know, the canines you call in Call of Duty, literally like those were the canines that were there and all they were doing were barking all night. That's what I remember. And then like glimpse in memory pops up. We walk like 2 miles, 3 miles to like the border of Iraq from the desert. And then one of my dad's friends picks us up and we go home. Really shaken up, right? But the crazy thing about Iraq, like this happens all the time, right? So we're like, cool, we'll keep living. What happened a couple of months after that, I think, is that my dad used to have an internet cafe, which was like really big in 2000. It's like literally a cafe where you go use the computer. Me and my brother go there all the time, played video games, whatever. We're sitting in the front of this Kinder cafe, like the internet cafe that my dad owned, and we're opening up Kinder eggs. You guys remember Kinder eggs? Like you open up a toy. So I open up the one that's like the magic trick toy, right? Where you make a ball disappear. As I'm opening it up, the barbershop across the street just gets shot up, right? So like a car pulls up in front of the barbershop across the street. They walk out. They shoot everybody in the barbershop down, right? Like, and so what was happening is there was a bunch of attacks going on in that street. These like, I don't really know what the intention of these attacks were, but they were all shot. And my dad just like picks us up, like literally grabs me and Mo by the head. Like we're so small. It's like this, like he just runs to the car. Yeah. And I remember like the thing about this story for me is like, I remember I got home and like the moment I got home as a kid, the first thing I did was turn on the computer at home to continue playing the game that I was playing at the internet cafe shop. But yeah, when that happened, I think that was like the moment where we were like, we can't stay here anymore. Because what happened was a couple of like weeks later or a couple of days later, they actually sent an envelope with a bullet to our house, like our personal house, like my parents' house. And they were like, you got to close it down or else like, you know, we're going to shoot you up, right? Because that's what we're doing. We're taking over the block, something like that. And so we were like, all right, like they sent the letter to the house. This is pretty serious. It's time to go, right? Yeah. So then we went to Egypt. And like at the time, I don't know what the notion was, but a lot of people were trying to immigrate out of Iraq to begin with. And a lot of people, you're trying to get to America, right? Like that's the goal. But you can't just get to America. It's very hard. So we have to go to Egypt first. We knew some people in Egypt. And Egypt was great. Loved Egypt. Great country. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but it was awesome. Went to like elementary school there. And then the only reason we really had to leave is because at the time in Egypt, they wouldn't give anybody from Iraq a legal working license. So my parents were both doctors. They've always been, my whole family is like a lineage of like, sort of like medical people. They just like were working at a hospital there, but like they weren't legally working. So at any point when we were living in Egypt, if the government decided to check up on this hospital and like do like an audit or whatever, my parents would end up in prison. And like Egyptian prison is not like American prison. Like it's literally like, you're going to go there for a long time, you know? So we were trying really hard to get like some of the social security work done to eventually come to America. And so a lot of my childhood was basically like literally just moving around, from country to country per se. And also like learning all these different like Arabic languages. Like, cause like when you speak Iraqi in Iraq, like people understand you. You come to Egypt. Like I remember the first day before school, I was like, Mom, like, what do I talk? Like, what language do I speak in when I go meet these kids? And she's like, just speak Arabic. Like, they're going to understand. Yeah. I go to Egypt, I speak Iraqi. And the guy, my Egyptian friend at the time, the first guy I sat next to, he was like, dude, you got to speak Arabic. I don't understand you. And so like, you had to learn that language. It's like, I'd say like my childhood was literally just like going from culture to culture and like adapting from culture to culture. That's how I ended up getting to America. Which is like a whole other story, honestly. But that's kind of what happened beforehand, right? Yeah. So there was like a little bit of some traumatic things. And I think I always, when I think about that story, I never think about how I was affected. I just keep thinking about my parents who like literally like imagine having kids, you just got married, like you have your job, you just graduated. Yeah. And right as all that starts, you got to fucking like leave and pick up and go somewhere completely different. Yeah. And so like, I think the stress they went through and like what I like, and coming to a new country, like they left us alone at the house all the time because they had to work and stuff. I think that like really, like that just sort of like got accidentally injected into me and my brother. Because we were just home and we were like, what is happening? Like, why are we here? You know, why are we at this country now as opposed to this one? And are we going to actually stay here? Like, should we invest in anything here? You know, like, because we might just leave again. So yeah, sorry, don't want to keep going for too long, but that's sort of like what my, like, you know, I'd say like 0 to 10 to 11 years old was like.
That's wild.
It's, yeah, I mean, now saying it now, it is pretty wild. I'm very grateful though. I'm really, really very grateful. Like, every time I tell this story and every time I even think about this story, I just keep thinking, wow, what a lucky motherfucker I am. And also like, Jesus, it's such a great story. And like, that's what I love about everything is that like my life, honestly, no matter which way it goes, I just love that it's a story and I live it like that. And it's definitely because of what happened. Like all these things that I couldn't control happened. And it's just like, it just led me to be in this mindset, dude, life is a great story. Like what's the big deal?
And so after kind of living out the first 10, 11 years like that, you came to America and you were like kind of integrated into like the normal school system.
Yeah.
What were you kind of doing in high school?
Right. Yeah. So, I'd say I really didn't have a personality till I got to high school. And one of the main reasons is like my whole life I've been really scared, like fearful. Like I'm a timid kid. When we got to America, I was terrified of everything and everyone.
Yeah.
And when I got to high school, things finally started making a little bit of sense. Because like I lived in this apartment building and some of the people that me and Omar has met some of my friends at home, they just knocked on my door one day and they were like, dude, why don't you just come out and play? You just moved here, right? So during high school, I got obsessed with music and I started taking it really seriously. It's because the moment I landed in America, the first thing I wanted to do was be a rock star. Like that's it. That's literally, I was on the plane, I saw New York out the window and I was like, dude, for some reason, I want to play the guitar and I want to be like a rock musician.
Yeah.
So during high school, it's literally all I did. I played guitar, I played trombone, I played every instrument you had to play to be in all the bands.
Yeah.
And my life was really about to be like being a musician. Like that's literally what I love to do. But right around junior year, and a lot of this is because of Mo actually. So I'm a junior in high school, right? I'm like doing nothing in my life.
For context, Mo is your brother.
Mo is my brother, right?
The rest of like we've worked with him before.
Yeah.
I go to school with Mo right now. And that's
Mo's the only reason this podcast exists.
The dude guessed the computer password at the Founders Inc. computer because it was the same as the Wi-Fi password. I probably should cut out.
We'll never forget that. We don't have to cut that. We didn't say the password.
Everyone knows what the Wi-Fi password is.
Oh, you said Wi-Fi password. Wow. Yeah, if you can get in here and you can get to this room, you deserve to.
That's what I was going to say. You probably just ask somebody at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was a junior and I had to break it to my parents that I wasn't going to Harvard, which is like always a really hard thing when you have immigrant parents. Like, cause like
they're doctors too.
They like come up to you and they're like, all right, it's time to think about college. And I'm like, you know what, Mom, you should have told me that freshman year because you can't do anything now. Like GPA is already screwed up.
What were your grades like?
I had like a 3. I was barely hanging out on a 3.
Okay.
Like 3.0. I really hated high school. And I'll tell you guys why. It's because of the honor society. Okay. And I'll explain what it was. So I was in high school, I was taking all the class. Like I wasn't like a dumb kid. Like I was taking all the APs and everything, but I just wasn't doing that good at them because like I do music and these classes were really hard. So it's like, I was just failing these big classes. So like I'd be grinding away all the time. And then this one year they finally released the honor board or whatever. And then I never got it because my GPA is lower than 3.4. And so like, I was like, wait, so it doesn't matter what classes you take. You just have to, you take the easy ones.
You're talking about the honor roll.
Yeah.
I got you.
Exactly. Right. So I was really mad. And like the moment that happened, I was like, that's when like I started becoming a rebellious, like I'd say like degenerate founder. Like that's when that switch happened because
high school honor roll. That'll do it.
Because I was like, whoa, that's like
He's
when
been
all
through
that
wars and like stopped buses and then he
dude
saw
was
the
kidnapped,
honor roll,
but it was a 3.4 GPA cutoff
in New York and went 3.4. No. This is the last straw.
This is why, because I was like, whoa, this is so it was like when that authoritarian thing, or like you hate authority thing starts coming into your head because you're like, what the hell? Like I'm working here so hard and these people don't want to recognize me. And it's like, I realized that like their recognition doesn't mean anything. And the moment I realized that, I was like, this whole thing doesn't mean anything. You know, this whole thing.
Oh,
like,
God, you went the whole other way.
I was like,
you went from life is so precious to none of the guy, this guy named Bert put up the honor roll.
It was tough.
And this means nothing now.
It was tough. And so like, that's when I got a little more obsessed with code. I started being really opinionated about my music. And I was like, Mom and Dad, I don't care about college. I'm going to be John Mayer.
Yeah. Kind of look like John Mayer. With the tattoos and I'm just saying. It's a compliment.
I mean, it's flattering. Dude, John Mayer pulls. But yeah, like, so that's kind of where I started hating that. And as it got closer to senior year and I was doing guitar, and this is like an important point because I feel like parents don't realize they're doing this. Like my parents were like, there's no way you're doing that. Like there's literally no way you're doing guitar. And the way they used to do that is they'd be like, look at that guy playing on the street. You want to end up like that? Look at that guy playing on the bar, right?
Yeah.
So it was like, it got into my head so hard and I was like shit, like maybe I do want like but I wasn't thinking like a founder. Like founders think they're going to be the big thing, right? At the time, I thought because I chose to be a musician, I would be a gigging musician at a bar. I wasn't thinking I'll be big. So it really got into my head and I ended up switching my mind like literally 3 months to senior year of school. Didn't apply to any schools yet. Everybody's already applied. The Stevens Institute of Technology sent me an interest letter for whatever reason for school.
It's a great school.
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to ED here and see what happens, right? And I ED'd there as a biomedical engineer.
ED is like early decision?
Early decision, yeah. And that's kind of what happened, right? Like I totally switched up. I really didn't know why I was going to school. And it wasn't until like really like after I graduated, I was working as a lifeguard, and that's when I found out about Code Academy, and that's when I started coding, right?
Code
so like
Academy.
Until like a month before I started college, I really like my life totally got flipped around because everything I invested in, which was music, was like completely not my path anymore. And so yeah, that's kind of like what happened during high school. Like that's really what like that's sort of what I was doing during high school. I was doing a lot of music, and then I switched over to tech, like right towards.
You still play?
All the time, yeah. I love it so much. Right whenever I'm done with this tech stuff, I'm going to go back to playing.
Yeah.
Okay, so now walk us through college, because that's where things got even more interesting.
Yeah. So I go to college, and I'm trying to think about what the best parts about the story you touch on, because I don't really want to go into it too deep, because I want to go into after college.
And you were still like with your like high school like apartment friends that you grew up with in college, or like in the same city for the most part?
Right, yeah. So a big thing about me with college is like I didn't really leave home at all. I stayed like, for the entire time I was in college, I just lived with my parents. And that was because I had this really close friend group. And the reason we were all so close, it was me, my brother, and a couple of guys, is because all these guys like sort of came from similar backgrounds, and all of them also like had something, like they were missing something at home. Like for me, what I was missing at home is I was like, dude, who is my family, right? Like we left them all in Iraq, and like the only family I know is my brother, my mom, and my dad. And so me and these guys and my brother like hung out every day at my parents' house, to the point where it's like that was the new family. Right. And I didn't want to leave, to be honest. Like I wasn't applying to college with the intention of not leaving, but I was not leaving, like in the back of my head. And so I went to college, and I was very confused. And I met a professor, the first programming class, the professor, and this guy comes in and he opens up with, if you don't know how to code, you're fucked. Right.
Yeah.
That's what this professor opens up with.
Great.
And I'm like, well, he's kind of he's right. Right. He's super right. So I got obsessed with code, and I did the same thing I did in high school. I stopped going to class to code for a whole year. And I got into this program at the time at Stevens called iSTEM, which was like built for entrepreneurship kids or whatever. And I realized that, dude, like you can't build a tech company unless you know how to build tech. And like nobody here is teaching me how to build tech. That's what I realized about that program. And so my mind shifted, and I was like, how can I actually get the ability to create technology, like to create apps and stuff? Because like I was doing it on my own, and I was having such a hard like time. And so honestly, like after that, like after I got into the program, the first winter break we had out of college, I bought this is a funny story. I bought a bunch of caffeine pills, and I was like, I'm just going to stay up till I learn how to code. Right.
Yeah.
And what I did, the first thing I built was this like Python, like trading app, like this thing on the finance. I just watched this long YouTube tutorial, and I coded for an entire winter, like the entire winter break. I didn't leave my house. And then I heard my dad on the phone with like some health tech SaaS company that was like trying to get into his hospital. And I was like, Dad, who are you talking to? And he's like, oh, it's this dude. He works at this, at this company. He's trying to integrate with my hospital. And I was like, can I talk to him? I was like, I'm learning iOS development. Maybe they need an iOS developer, right? So I get on the phone with this guy, like he was giving a demo to my dad. I get on the phone, and I'm like, hey, like I've been doing Swift. right? That's all I say. And he's like, fuck it, we'll have you an interview tomorrow, right? Right? And so he literally sends me an interview, like with the whole thing. And I'm like, bro, what do you mean interview? Like, so I start watching the Udemy courses on how to pass a tech interview all night, show up the next day to their office, flunk the interview. Like, oh my God, it was embarrassing. Like I literally didn't know how to do anything. But I just told them basically, I was like, dude, like I'm obsessed with this. I just want to learn. I was like, I don't want money. I want nothing but to just watch you guys build whatever you're building. And that's kind of like what happened during college. Is like college like switched really fast for me because like I was around all these people that wanted a career and all that. But I just felt like such an outsider because I was like, I don't even know why I'm here. I was spending all this money. And even like when I found code as a passion, it wasn't returned to me by college because I was like, it takes too long. And even when we were coding wasn't that interesting in school. So like, I've always like felt like an outsider, like any school body, I guess, to bring this back to a main point, like I've always felt like an outsider there. And that's why like somehow, some way I disconnected.
Interesting.
And that's how we ended up getting to like, you know, that's sort of how I ended up leaving school is because of that conversation actually.
So you worked at Wellsheet, right? And we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
But you left school before you worked at Wellsheet?
So Stevens had this program called Co-op. And Co-op is basically where you leave school to intern for a company. And I took the Co-op with them simply because I was like, this is an amazing engineering team. And I stayed at that Co-op for 8 months. And during that Co-op, dude, like I worked so hard. Like I worked so hard. I literally gave up everything in my life to code, like everything. Like the guitar, I didn't play the guitar for like 8 months. I'd say like, if you ask my parents today, what was the day that Ali changed? It was the day that I took that Co-op. Because when I took that, I walked in and I actually walked into that startup thinking, I want to be here for the rest. I don't want to go back, right? So I walked in like that. I was like, the only way to do that is to literally, in 8 months, turn into a professional software engineer. Whatever that means. That's a weird word to use nowadays because everybody's a software engineer. But at the time, I was like, I need to be a professional programmer. Right? I was like, this is where I belong. I was like, I belong in tech. I was like, I belong with these startup people. I belong with these engineers. I was like, I am not going back to school. Like, right? Because I was like, I don't want to hang out with kids who are not taking it to the next level, or even I don't want to hang out with anybody that's the same age as me. Like, I want to know about the next step, right? And so like that's literally how I walked in, and that sacrifice for me was literally I dropped everything, and every single day go to work, code as hard as I can, and I come back home and I code something else. Like I was starting a little bit of freelancing then. I was helping this guy, this rapper actually, build a location. Like, you guys know Get Saturday? You guys know that app?
No.
Okay, so it's like how a lot of tech people network, and the app is basically like SnapMap. And I was building a version of that app, but like 5 years ago. Get Saturday is big now. It came out like a year or two ago. It was like 5 years ago or 4 years ago, whatever. I was helping this rapper build this app. So I'd go to work.
Location-based social.
And then I'd go home.
Sounds familiar.
No, literally. And I build this app for this guy. And for a year of my life, even my whole friend group, I changed them. I was like, we're working. I was like, that's it. No more fucking around. I was like, everybody pull out a Trello board. I don't care what you're doing. That like, this is what Scrum is. This is what a stand-up is. We're all working.
Wait, you taught them how to code too?
I taught a lot. I don't want to say I taught a lot of people how to code because I think coding is this individual thing. But we've always been the type of friend group to where it's like when anybody's succeeding, like sort of the Drake mentality, right? Like if somebody's succeeding, everybody else has got to succeed too. And I've always been that type of guy.
Interesting.
And I was telling Omar before we started the podcast that like whenever I think about this stuff, I always think like I'm like more of a healer and a supporter than I am a main character, like in my own head.
Yeah.
It's like I feel a lot more value by just supporting somebody do something. And it's like, and I always feel guilty when I have something that other people don't. And so like for me, when I dropped out of school, like I felt, or when I even did the co-op, right? Because all my friends weren't in software yet. I was like, dude, like software is so cool. I was like, these guys are mechies. Like they're going to these factories, right?
Yeah.
Like I was like, dude, I'm going to like this cool WeWork. I was like, everybody's chill. And I knew these guys so well, like all my friends. I was like, the life you guys talk about, I was like, it's right here, right? And so I really did a good job of not like, I didn't force anybody to do anything, but I was very open about exactly what was going on and exactly what I did to get there. And I was very open to helping. Like I was like, anybody, I was like, cause teaching makes you better.
Yeah.
Right? So I love teaching. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like what it kind of was. I'm sorry, I kind of lost where I was.
Like Wellsheet, like you dropped out.
That's what I was doing during the co-op. Yeah, I was just teaching people how to code. And then at the same time, I was freelancing, and whatever freelance agent I got, like I was just like, you guys want to help me code? All right, come jump on. Like I'll give you I'll share the money, whatever.
These guys had no coding experience.
No coding experience. We just all sat down and figured it out.
Wait, even Ming?
No, even Ming, yeah. Because at the time we were all not trying to do software. Like we were all Stevens is a mechanical engineering school.
Yeah,
it's very big for mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
So that's what it was, and that's what empowers you too. When you and your friends are all doing the same thing, like, and you're hopefully healthily competing about it.
Yeah,
you end up becoming monsters, like literal, like the best of the best, and that's what we were all obsessed with. We all had this like mentality where it's like, dude, we all love each other. We've known each other since we were literally 11.
Yeah,
we're gonna change the world, right? We don't know how or with what, but we're gonna change the world. And like, it's not like we pick software. It's just like, oh, I had the opportunity, right? So I was like, this is it. This is the coolest thing I'm doing right now. Let's do this. And that's what I did for that co-op. Like that was literally my life. Just code, nothing else.
And the Well Sheet team specifically was a great, like, that worked out really well for you, right? Like the guys from AWS or from Amazon. 100%.
The Well Sheet team is a team that like will forever have my heart. And like, it's just, I love them so much. But they were really great because my mentor there and my manager was somebody who like, just sort of like, I feel like really saw me. Like he really saw like this kid just wants to learn. And if you give him the right sort of steps, like he'll full send it. And he was like the most incredible engineer I've ever met. Like he was like an entrepreneur and an engineer. So he's like sort of what I wanted to be just like 5 years from now. Yeah. Right. And he taught me everything. And it was really great. Like he was such a great teacher. It was to the point where like I used to remember I used to have conversations with everybody because you'd have like these horizontal and vertical one-on-ones. And at one point they were like, you know, man, like, can you stop asking him some questions? He needs to get to work right now. And like, it was clear that this dude was going out of his way to teach me and to really watch me grow. And so I was very fortunate. I don't know who can get that lucky. Right. Yeah.
That's crazy. So did your friends follow you to what you're working on now, like on that path?
That whole friend group is a W, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my friends now are founders or just software engineers. Besides that, they work in finance, so it's not that diverse, unfortunately. But I wouldn't like. I hate saying they followed because like I feel like that just does them a disservice. Like everybody's their own, and again, like you could say I followed my mentor. Did exactly everything he did to get here, right? So I think like following people is maybe like I wouldn't put it that way. I'd just say like they're inspired because you know we're living in this town and we're just going to school and everybody's searching for what it means to be you, and you know for some reason people just if there is money involved they're like, oh, that's what it means to be me. So like that's really the first thing that attracts people to something is like, oh, it makes money, and software was making hella money. Like this is back in 2018, 2019, 2020, like. People were making so much money off of software, and it was like you knew if you were going into software, you're gonna make a bag. Yeah. So that's like what initially interested everybody. But I think it's just like they saw what I was doing. They ended up a lot of them were interested in CS initially, or ended up switching to CS. And as everybody got into CS, they were like, "This is awesome, and we should all help each other because we're all coding, right?" I mean, listen, it wasn't so smooth, right? Because when you're all doing it the same thing too, there's a lot of competition and a lot of tension. Because everybody's comparing themselves, which is normal, right? It's how you get better, but you know, it's tough. Like it's sometimes it ends up getting you into fights and stuff.
And so when you, to fast forward a little bit, you learned how to code at Well Sheet, and then last year you actually quit your job halfway through the year to work on Kanopy, which is the agency.
Yeah.
So what did the agency do exactly?
Yeah. So while I was working at Well Sheet, throughout the 2.5 years, I transitioned from just being obsessed with coding because I did so much code. Like so most people are going to their job, they're working during their job. I was doing code all the time, so I got really good. And what happened was I started being more obsessed with leadership because like I started thinking about, well, wait, like I'm teaching all these people on the side and I'm trying to run my own like freelancing thing. So I got more obsessed with engineering management, right? Which is like this sort of like next step of it all, which is like how do you actually now not only be a great individual contributor, but empower a whole team to do the same thing you're doing. And the best part is this team already knows how to code. So it's not like the skill isn't teaching them how to code. The skill is actually breaking down the project, assigning whoever, and being able to like really see something engineering fully through. And I started being really obsessed with that. And that's when my manager and my mentor made it look so easy, right? So, you know, I'm getting to this end of the well sheet. I'm 2 years and a half. I got a couple of raises, right? And I'm feeling like I'm peaking. And then I remember I moved out finally from my parents' house. So the first 2 years I was working at Wellsheet, actually, I just stayed at my parents'. I move out and I'm like, dude, the rent for this year, and I was living in a like pretty crappy place. Like the rent for the rest of my lease, like gonna be 20 grand. I should find out how to make 20 grand. That's all I wanted to do. And then I get a call from Kanopy's first client, or soon to be.
Was Eli?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he calls me. Well, actually, it was the founder of the other co-founder that called me, and he basically just said, "Dude, how's it going? Your friend Hayden, which is one of my really good friends from school, like said you're a great programmer. We're having this issue where we're trying to grow our engineering team, but it's a little hard. Like, would you want to hop on the CTO and talk about it?" And it was like one of those calls where it's like, you ever like ask for something and out of nowhere it just comes? Because I was looking for something on the side extra and it just comes like referral, like out of nowhere. I haven't talked to the guy.
You didn't talk to the guy. No, yeah.
And so they call me and I was like, oh, like, so the problem is your stack is just, I would just make your stack more modern. So that way, you actually have engineers working in it. They were writing in a stack that many engineers didn't write. I said, just transition to MERN, which is really big at the time, Mongo, Express, React, and you'll get a lot more engineers. And they were like, oh, awesome. Like, how should we go about that transition? I was like, well, you should probably like find somebody to do it if you never ran in it. And this is how I wasn't even trying to get them as a client then. Like I was like, I'll help you find the guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So like I'm looking at myself, I'm writing React all the time. But I was like, I'll help you find the guy, right? And it goes back to this thing I told you guys earlier where I always feel guilty about like having something that other people don't. So like I don't want to gouge them. And so what happens is they keep sending me these contracts they get. They were like, what do you think about this guy or this guy? And they're all garbage, right?
Yeah.
And after like a couple months of hopping on a call with this guy every week to try to find out who's going to do the React, I said, you know what, bro? I'll just fucking do it. I'll transition you to React.
Yeah.
So I call one of my old friends that I built some apps with during college, who's my co-founder now. And I'm like, yo, he called me like a couple of weeks ago. You guys ever have one of those calls, one of your friends calls? He's like, dude, this is the year. We're going to be billionaires this year. Let's fucking do it, dude.
Yeah.
So he just called me about
Such
that.
a New York call.
So bro, he calls. So I call him and I'm like, dude, we're not going to be millionaires with this, but I think I found us a little project to work on. I was like, let's do this, right? Yeah. And so what we had to do is take all this whole app and rewrite it in a different technology. And just like, everything, that you think is really exciting at first, we procrastinated like a shit ton. So we took on the project, and then we ended up like just really messing up with time estimates, which is very classic software freelance agency. So what happened was, because we messed it up so bad, we ended up accidentally building so much rapport with those guys, right? Because they were like, I remember getting the calls and like, dude, when is it going to be done? We're literally, because what they did is they paused building new features on their existing stack till we made the new stack. But we were over 6 weeks late on the new build, okay? And so I felt so bad about this, right? And I'd say this is like when my life really took a turn, because what I started doing is right when I finished at Wellsheet, I'd go to their office in Soho and I'd stay up all night. And I did that with my co-founder for 4 weeks straight. I'm not even kidding with you guys. No sleep for 4 weeks till this app was finished. Yeah. Because we didn't realize they had so many users, right? So we were like actually causing like major issues with this build. And so like, that's why I love those guys so much, that first client, because they really believed in us and they let us mess up this bad. And instead of taking it as like, we're never going to work with you again, they saw how hard we tried to fix it, because we literally didn't sleep at their office. And we ended up building such a great relationship to the point where we ended up signing a bigger contract with them after that, just 20 grand rebuild everything contract. Yeah. And it was more money than I've ever seen at the time. And I started doing that at the same time as my job. And then obviously the people at my job were like, started noticing that I'm so busy and that I'm like sort of like literally waking up, no sleep. I ended up leaving my job to do the firm. And it was really because that first client ended up getting big out of nowhere. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely like the hardest like couple months of my life, because like you were just talking about like you're literally coding full time for your job, and it was the hardest thing about it too is like, and this is where like Ali's just being a kid and he's fucking things up, because like the right way to go about this is like, don't take on more than you can handle, right? Because what happened was I built up all this tension with the people in my job, because they were like, why are you fucking like, why are you not working? Like, you dropped out for this, like, why are you not working, right? That's what they said. And I ended up building some tension with my managers and stuff. But that's why it was very hard to leave, right? Because I was like so invested into that job. But it took me a while, and I eventually got to the point where they were like, listen, bro, you either get fired or you leave. And I was like, all right, I'm going to leave, you know? And so I left, and we started doing the firm full time. And through that first client, we met other clients, and we started building things up. And so what we actually did, sorry to answer your original question, is what we do is we partner with founders who just raised money, who don't have a traditional background in tech. And all that really means is they've never been an engineer themselves at an engineering firm or an engineering organization. What we'd say is like, hey, listen, you just raised all this money. You have all this traffic. You clearly need to build and hire. Don't just hire anybody. Like, we'll come help you. We'll make sure that you hire the right guy. We'll make sure that when people actually join the company, they can get work done, right? And we'll make sure you're writing in the right technology. And so the real name for this now is probably like a fractional CTO of the sorts. But to get technical, like what we're really doing is we were building up an engineering culture for companies. And it's something that a technical co-founder would usually do, right? But these guys, they either already had one and didn't know how to do that, or they didn't have one. And so it was like this priceless thing. And the thing that I think really sold well was how young, like I was specifically, because they were like, wait, because all of these like sort of like people were around our age, right? And they got funding, right? They built an amazing thing. They got funding early on in their life. So they're in that same spot where they're like, what do I do? But they like would drop out of school to build a company. I dropped out of school to work for a company. So it was like this really big, like sort of finding each other thing where it's like, oh my God, like instead of building a startup, you actually just worked at one where people actually knew engineering. So it's like perfect, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how we partnered up with a lot of them. And what we do is we literally, like I said, like usually like rebuild or guide the rebuild of their stack to a different technology that's more popular. And then we'd actually begin trying to build their engineering team. And that means like interview a bunch of engineers, vet them, manage them, and grow them to a good spot. And then once everything is sort of stable, we'd fizzle out or scale it down to like very, very low hours a week and move on to a different company.
What do you think it was about your management style that actually like efficiently rebuilt these systems and got you so many clients?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, honestly, was that a lot of these guys were just simply not knowledgeable about engineering. So a lot of this was, and this kind of goes into like why I sort of stopped doing this, is a lot of this was literally just like I've just seen this before. I've just seen this play out before. And that's what a lot of engineering is. Like, honestly, like when I think about like good engineers and experienced engineers, like it really is that they've seen things play out at a certain size before. And for me, like, that's kind of like what it mainly was. Like I'd be able to, I walk from Welshie. I used to go to Welshie and I feel like dumb. I'm like, I'm the dropout. Everybody here went to print. Like, everybody here is super, super high up. But then I go to these startups and I'd be like, wait, this is so simple. I've seen this before, right? At Welshie, like I know what to do here. And so like that was, first of all, really motivating to me. I was literally like addicted to that. Like this idea, telling people what's right and what to do, and then seeing it play out like at scale and working, I was obsessed with it. And so like the main thing I was providing was literally like, I think safety. Like people just felt safe because they were like, oh, like this scary thing. And you got to understand, like, and this kind of goes back to like what most founders are feeling all the time. All founders all the time are feeling self-doubt.
Yeah.
Like they're just constantly thinking, and even at every stage, they're constantly thinking, is this going to work? Is this my life? And so like to meet somebody that saw exactly the problem you're running into right now and they just fix it, which is really how consultants capitalize. They're so good at pitching it that way. It was really relieving. And for a lot of these guys, like built up these really strong relationships because like at the end of the day, I'm a good guy, right? I'm just like, dude, you're fucking amazing. Like you built this amazing company. Why are we going to mess it up because of bad engineering? Dude, the engineering, there's books on it. People figured it out already. We just got to get it working, right?
Yeah.
I was like, we're not going to mess up your startup because you just simply didn't read the book or didn't have the experience. I was like, I got it. We'll do it right here. And that's kind of what it was. It was like, there's just relentlessness to help. And also just like literally we didn't have a strict format. Like we would do anything they did. Like we were like the guys you hired to just fix it,
Yeah.
And I think that's what it was. It was like people knew, especially after we did the first client, like people knew we were going to stay up we will stay up weeks without sleeping to make your startup work. And and it was a small circle of people that this was kind of spreading around in. So I think that's what people really liked. Because if you think about it, the biggest problem with hiring contractors and part-timers is that the incentive misalignment.
Yeah, because they don't have equity to stay up late and all that.
Exactly, right? They're like, I'm going to pay you a high hourly you're gonna just work as much as you got paid to do and nothing. We were not going like that. That first 20 grand contract, like we billed like 200 hours. I literally like probably like 3,000 hours on that thing.
Yeah.
And I think like that's what it was. And it's like, it goes back to like a lot of really common advice, just like work for free, you know, don't overvalue yourself, right? Like just do it because you love to do it. And that's kind of like, that's, I think, what resonated the most with people, especially founders.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like you see the almost basic like tale of supply and demand in a high ticket market where you can do something better than most people and deliver the service in a way better than most people. And you guys actually did that, and clearly it played out.
Yeah, it played out. I mean, it felt not real for a lot of it, because also the other thing that I have to mention about all of this is that this happened during the most wild bull market in the history of the world, right? I mean, a lot of what we were seeing was like too much money, right? Like startups that raise a lot of money, and like they're trying to deploy all this capital, and like when you're thinking tech, where do you deploy the capital? On engineers, right? And that's you know, it goes into like a lot of what the startup I'm building on now is working on, but it's like you have to be very careful about how you deploy your capital to engineers, because engineers are investments, and like the better they are, the more difficult they are to manage, in my opinion. So like that's kind of what it was. Like we saw a lot of that, and we were like, I genuinely just like was so intrigued. I was like, this is a crazy problem to have, you know?
But you love fixing things. Like that's kind of your personality, huh?
I love fixing things, not only engineering, but I just love being there. Like if one of you guys is having a problem with a girl and you want to talk for 5 hours tonight, I'll talk for it for 5 hours. Like for no reason. Like I just love listening and trying to suggest a solution, because maybe I'm a know-it-all, right? But like that's kind of what it is.
Why,
like,
you think it's an engineering issue?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Probably, right?
I think it's like you get obsessed with one thing you know how to fix, and then now you think you could fix everything. Like I think that's definitely what it is.
He said, yeah, you have girl problems, use linear. It'll solve everything.
Yeah, you have girl problems, bro. It's just like an engineering issue. We'll find, like, you know what I mean? We'll break it down. Let's pull out a whiteboard, modularize it, you know?
Oh God.
But yeah, I definitely do.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of like, I think everything.
So last year you guys did something pretty cool. You moved into this like insane penthouse in Hoboken.
Yes, in Jersey City.
Jersey City.
Yes.
Jersey City. Okay.
Oh wait, that changes. You kept saying that's the lot.
Hoboken
different.
was the
Well, so it's
the train stop right next to
two
it.
really different places.
So, well, okay, so it's Newport, Jersey City, so it's actually very close to, it's like literally like Hoboken, you walk 2 minutes.
It's a 2-minute walk.
It's still on the water.
Okay.
But yeah, we did, right? And so this is why. We did really great consulting, right?
Yeah.
We got a little more clients. We also started doing a lot of crypto clients, which really brought in a ton of money too, because besides just doing this really integrated stuff that happened to be like come in the team, that's what I kind of focused on, like build engineering teams for people. We started getting all this traffic of people just wanting NFT sites, like when NFT was popping off.
Yeah.
And it was dumb, like it was dumb money. It was like, this is easy to build. Like we're obviously going to build it. They were also all really beautifully designed websites. Like, oh my God, they looked great. So like for a front end engineer, it was like candy. I was like, of course I want to build this. I didn't design it and you tell me I get to build it. So we did all that and we made a ton of money. And we were growing like we needed more engineers. So we ended up hiring people. Like we ended up doubling, like we went from like just me and Mike, which is my co-founder, to like hiring on like 3 interns we brought on just cause like, why not? Right. And then we also brought on like 3 other full-time guys. So all of a sudden now we have a team of 8. Now, looking back at it now, horrible mistake. God, we burned so much money on that whole team. We scaled way too fast. I don't know why we did that.
But you said to fuel the demand, yeah?
Yeah, we had to fuel the demand, but we were not managing it properly.
So you couldn't manage your own engineers.
It was tough, dude. It was tough. Like it's literally what it was.
He's like, I got to call you back. My engineering team is having a nightmare.
No, literally, dude. And like that's what's so funny about this whole thing. Like it's a lot easier to fix other people's problems than your own.
Interesting.
And so like we were having a lot of trouble, like we ended up like we were working in this like teeny tiny apartment in Hoboken. Like it was actually, this is way bigger than our living room at the time. And we used to have 6 people work in the living room.
This was before the penthouse.
Yeah. And so we were like, okay, we don't want to get an office because like, we just don't want to. It's too much money. And at the, I don't know, there's a lot of things going on that we just didn't want to get an office. Yeah. We had to move. And we were like, and a lot of startups we knew were doing this whole like live with your founders thing. Yeah. So we were like, fuck it, we're gonna live with our founders. What's the worst that can happen? And so we were like, but also we have this big team, right? So we got to get a big spot, right? So we ended up getting like a larger spot. That's why you keep saying penthouse, right? Because when you look up 3 bedrooms in New Jersey, all you get is like in Jersey City.
Oh yeah.
All you get is penthouses. Like
this is like the High-Rect office. We had the penthouse at across from Oracle Park where the founders live. So it's the same concept. Instead of getting an office, that's what they got.
Yeah, exactly. It's like literally just, it's a 3-bedroom with a big living room, right?
Yeah. On the top floor.
Yeah, on the top floor. And we were like, this makes a lot of sense, right? Because we're going to have this whole big team. And we literally bought, like, by the way, we bought like 8 desks. Like if you guys ever come to my place now, it is an office. But then, the hopefully, so we're going to this story. Now it's going to go down.
Okay. Okay.
So what happened was we took on a massive client, probably the biggest contract we've ever signed. And the contract was like it was close to like it was just a lot of money. Okay. And what happened was it was very ambitious. Okay. And I was like designing this contract and I knew it was ambitious, but I was like, dude, fuck it. Right. Like we're doing good. It's time to go big. Yeah. Right. We start this contract, things fall apart bad, like just as bad as it can go. Like it was really bad. A big part of the problem was with like just like miscommunication and misalignment with the original stakeholders that wanted to sign the contract. And another big part of it was like these problems that kept happening with managing the team, right? And the problems that actually led us to stop consulting and start the company we're starting now. And what happened is like we got this contract right as we got that place and we were like growing, it was exciting. And then 2 months into this massive contract that we designed our whole team around, by the way, because it was so intense. We were like, the whole team is going to do this. The contract ends. They ended early. We get in the disagreement with the stakeholders. Yeah. We find out it's ending, right? So like, in retrospect, like we missed out on 65 to 75% of the revenue that was going to come from that contract. And it was an absolutely company altering moment, right? Because all of a sudden, like when that happens, especially when in a consulting type of thing, like now you have too many people all of a sudden, right? Because like you scaled up to handle that big contract falls apart. Now it's like, why do I need all these people? And so we kind of freaked out a little bit. So right after it ended.
When was this? What month?
This was This was right at the beginning of summer of 2022.
Okay, so this was before I got here.
Yeah, before this is before I met you.
Okay.
And I was like while the time I was meeting you, I was dealing with this.
Interesting.
Right after dealing with this. So what happened is like we made a lot of long-term commitments on something that didn't work out, right? Yeah. And it was like kind of like the bull market beating you in the ass, right? And so I was also really tired of consulting because it was really hard. It was really hard to work so hard for companies that you didn't build on your own, especially because we were doing equity deals too. And it was just like soul sucking. I mean, this like being like really the reason we got paid so much is because we were getting paid to be wrong.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what I always tell people. It's like, if you want to be a great anybody at anything, just be really good at being wrong. People who can be wrong get paid a lot of money.
Sure.
And so it was just really soul sucking. And the only reason I dropped out of school in the first place and joined tech is because I just wanted to be prepared to build a tech startup. And at that moment, I was like, I think I'm prepared. Like, I was like, I think like I worked as an engineer. Yeah. I fucked up a little bit doing consulting, right? I was like, maybe it's time to like actually, have some balls and like go out and build a product. And so that's kind of like what went through my head at the time. And it was really hard. It was super, super hard because like a big part of me like felt like an absolute failure, honestly. Because I was like, I really worked my ass off to make that contract happen. And also during the contract, I really worked my ass off to make them happy, but it was simple. Like it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And it was like this big imposter moment where I was like, why did any of it work? Like when that happened, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You ask yourself, it's like, why, like if this one didn't work, like did the other ones really work? Or are we just like hanging around? Like you just have all the self-doubt, right? The first failure like really sucks, like especially after all that highs. And so like what we did was we took a month off. I was like, you know what, dude, like we've been working, 100-hour weeks for, what is it like been like, maybe like the whole year. I was like, it's time to just go reflect. So I went to actually Beach's house in Florida for 2 weeks. And I was like, what are we going to do next? We were having calls and stuff, but sorry, that's kind of where Kanopy, I don't want to go into the next part of this story because that's kind of like, I guess what you want to jump on next.
Okay.
But that's kind of what happened with Kanopy, right? It's like we really had a good niche.
Yeah.
But still, and a lot of startups run into this issue. It's like what happened is like we overscaled, right? Like we scaled too quickly and we didn't manage it properly. And we ended up like not being the executionary operating dream that people originally hired us for. Because all of a sudden now we were big, slow, and stagnant and hierarchical.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what killed us at the end of the day. Like, right. And that's also when I just found out how hard of a business model to scale consulting really is. Like very hard. Very, very hard in my opinion, right? Because it's not like SaaS where like you work on one thing and that thing scales.
Yeah.
It's like you're always working on different things. And every single project you jump on, you have to familiarize, how do you say that word? Familiarize yourself with the domain, switch, you have to get into the founder's head now and care about his mission, which is brand new. It's different than the old mission.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to scale.
Instead of scaling it back, why did you choose to jump onto Napoleon? Am I allowed to say the name?
Yeah, of course, dude, of course. So yeah, instead of scaling it, like, yeah, we could have easily taken that failure and said, let's look for another client. But that's where it goes back to, I just didn't want to, right? And it's because like, I was like, I don't want to be just a consultant, right? Yeah. I was like, I admire the founders I work with so much. Like I admire their ability to raise. I admire their ability to reach a massive following and reach a massive amount of customers. I was like, that's the dream. Like, that's my dream. And around the time this happened, like I was also getting job offers from every single client that we worked with, like me personally, to be like honestly, it's sort of a dream job, like to actually be like an engineering leader for them and run their engineering teams. And so like, I had this moment where I was like, dude, what is wrong with me? Like, why would I turn down all that stuff, turn down the firm to do this business, like this app that I'm doing now? And I realized because that's just who I fucking am. I guess that's what founders are. Like it's this set of irrational decisions that lead you to do the thing simply because it's your dream. Like that's it. Like there was no other rationality. Like there was literally not a single thing that made sense, like financially, about this decision, right? And that's why, like when I had that moment, I was like, dude, that's probably why this is the right thing to do.
Like that's literally the power of B2B SaaS.
Yeah, B2B SaaS, right? But that's kind of like how it ends up. Like it's so funny. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I just had that moment. I was just like, if I'm already saying no and I'm willing to turn all this down, then this sounds like something that's going to be worth my time. And so that's why I ended up, that's why we ended up doing the SaaS. It's not even like that we want to build a B2B SaaS company, but it's just like, that's what everybody fucking does. So we're like, all right, we're just going to do that.
Okay. So what is this company?
Right. So we're building Napoleon. Right. The firm was called Kanopy Labs. The product we're building is Napoleon. What we want to do is we want to actually scale what we were trying to do with the consulting, which is convince people that if you focus on engineering processes early, you will actually save time and money in the long run, and it is worth the investment, right? And at the time, the only way to do that was to literally do the engineering for them and show them how we worked and show them this is the way.
Yeah.
But I think we're now trying to do it through software, right? And so it really goes back to like the foundational theory behind all this, which is like what we thought made a great startup was awesome conversations, what we're doing right now, right? The ability to talk to your team, reach decisions, get into this flow where ideas are happening, right? We want to help teams have better conversations. That was like the original mission that really united us all together, because consultants, what do? They run great meetings. That's it. Like, to be honest, right? You're running an amazing meeting. Like that's what you're getting paid to do. Besides like some freelance dev work, that's what you're getting paid to do. And so we were like, why do people have such problems with meetings, right? And a big part of it, and a big part of our why now is that like, ever since remote got big, conversations have been sort of villainized, right? This is what we were talking about earlier, which is like now, instead of a meeting being, just a meeting, you're now thinking about, well, how many meetings have I had today, right? Because the whole world now runs on meetings, right?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure I don't have too much. And then like it grows into this toxic relationship with meetings where it's like you're actually now working to reduce all of them, which is not necessarily, we don't think that's necessarily the right approach, right? And so, in 2001 and 2000, obviously, people who are way older and way more experienced with all of this came out with Agile, right? And they were like, this is sort of how you should go about, conversating and working together. But when we were starting the company and when we were interviewing people about Agile and about stand-ups and stuff, we realized that like Agile is not really liked by a lot of people, and it's overdone in a lot of companies, and it's actually turning into the thing it wasn't supposed to turn into, which is non-Agile, right? Agile started becoming the hierarchical sort of process that you hate as a company.
And Agile is like the development workflow for like engineering teams to build out like an app.
Yes, Agile is like, Agile is exactly that. It's like development for, and a lot of people have different definitions for it, but it's like, it's something that's sort of popular, right? And a lot of people were doing it at the time. And even as a firm, we were pitching it. We were like, dude, you got to have the right Agile processes, like do the right stand-up, postmortem, whatever. But now, funny enough, like our whole mission is about helping startups have custom ad hoc meeting structures that feel natural. And it goes back to like something that I've been saying for such a long time, is that like people hate doing the same shit at the same time every day. Like, that's it. Like, if you just change the times of when things happen, like that's a simple thing that you can make your life more dynamic, right? And it goes back to like how a lot of artists and a lot of, you know, even creators talk about like how discipline sometimes kills creativity, right? It's like, if you're not uncomfortable and if your environment isn't changing, you know, you get comfortable. And when you get comfortable, you're not creative, right? And that was the philosophy we took towards meetings, was like it's not about, you know, finding the right cadence where it's like, oh, you know, we're a company that does stand-ups once a week. We're a company that does stand-ups Tuesdays and Thursdays. Like, it's not about that. It's actually about like having, you know, what we're trying to build like a new process that just like you automatically meet when it's necessary. The meeting becomes sort of like the exception. And whenever there is a meeting, it is a great conversation and does end up, you know, going into actually generating decisions.
So it sounds like the product takes in information from something. I'm guessing it's like Linear or GitHub or whatever. And it uses that to determine when people are supposed to meet. Yeah.
So we don't only want to determine when people are supposed to meet. We actually want to help them know what to talk about during the meeting. And this goes back to like this idea of automation, right? Like the only reason people hate a lot of these processes, and the only reason like, you know, project management nowadays is kind of a pain is because you have to stay disciplined with it and you have to consistently do this redundant amount of work. And so we don't only want to, like, we want to be sort of like the manager, but through the software, where we're literally designing, like we're designing your meeting cadence, but we're also designing what your meetings are about and what you talk about during those meetings. And then whatever action items start popping up from those meetings or the follow-up items, we're going to automatically enforce them. So that way it's not, no one has to be disciplined, right? And that's kind of like the point. It's like the dream startup, right? Everybody wants to stay in that startup mode forever. We actually want to make that happen. And I think we have a hunch that might work, which is that like use the data to determine when to meet. And when you do meet, make it impactful, and then use the data again to make sure that what was supposed to happen during the meeting actually happened. And if there is a software, if there is some, you know, sentient being that's doing that, all of the sudden now, all this pressure on management disappears. And management starts changing a little bit. What is management?
That's what I was going to ask. Are you making management obsolete, or it's just changing the framework?
I think it's changing the framework, because I think what we're trying to get rid of is the part of management I think people don't like, which is all this like work on work, right? The part of management that really matters is the people part, right? And that's why really you hire managers and you hire engineering managers, engineering leaders, is because these guys have worked with engineers before. Engineers respect these guys, and they'll figure out a way to empower your engineers and grow them. And that's something that can never be replaced. But what can be replaced is all this redundant work of proving work was done to non-technical people, of just like helping push things through by just reminding people to take a look at things. So we're trying to automate all that and just trying to like, you know, get rid of work on work, right? We don't need this. And if you just look at all the companies now, like this is starting to sort of come about, right? Because we have all this economic pressure to downsize that's starting to happen. We also have all these layoffs happening, right? And so that just tells you that a lot of these companies, just because they were working, right, doesn't mean they were efficient, right? And we're trying to uncover that, right? And so if we were to partner with an early company, we'll help you be efficient from the get-go. If we were to partner with a company that's already got a bunch of people, we'd help it discover how to be more efficient and potentially even help downsize it, right? And I think that's what everybody really wants to do. Everybody really wants to now, I think, finally, like now the culture is sort of shifting towards this, like I want to get the most done with as little as possible. And that's what we're helping do, right? In our own way. A lot of companies help do this, but we're doing it, you know, through the avenue I just told you guys.
I mean, you have an interesting perspective on this, right? Learning how to code, not being a coder first, and kind of your experience with I think he'd always tell me there's a difference between going to school for CS and then actually building a product or making a startup, right?
Yeah. So like when you mentioned Code Academy, I kind of laughed a bit because I think trying to learn code on Code Academy probably set me back like 3 or 4 years, because I went through the like intro like Python or Java course and I was like, oh, this is horrible. Like I don't want to do this. I just want to make an app. And I started making an app in probably my gap year, like after high school. It's horrible. I like mixed up my JavaScript with TypeScript, not knowing that those were supposed to be 2 different files because I had no fundamentals. And then eventually, I think last year, we started working on we started working on a project, and I didn't want to rely on a technical co-founder. Up until that point, I'd been very marketing, like growth focused, but I was like, I don't want to rely on anyone. I'm just going to do it myself.
Yeah.
So I would stay up. I took a gap from school. Like I just taught myself how to code, like full like JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever. I think the second time doing it, I had the fundamentals from going to school and like learning like data structures, algorithms, all like the basic stuff that I guess people overlook. But I realized that it's very different teaching yourself how to build like a React app versus going through like 4 years of school and then doing a master's in like CS.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think this is something that like, I feel like is a big question. A lot of people are like, I want to code. And the first question is like, why, right? Do you want to code to get a job, or do you want to code because you have an idea? Because if you want to code and you have an idea, honestly, you probably shouldn't code because there's just such faster ways to get your idea validated. But if you want to code to get a job, you should totally go to school. And this is why I say that, because you are not going to make it through those big tech rounds unless you are into data, like the stuff there at Berkeley, like that curriculum is amazing, right? And it is designed to get you into those jobs, because like the problem, it's always a scale issue. If I'm interviewing a candidate pipeline of 500 people, I will interview every single person. But if you have 20 to 100,000 people applying, you need to scale it up to data structures and algorithms, because that's the only thing that, like, how do you abstract intelligence? Like programming is literally solving puzzles using code, right? Yeah. So it's like the lowest abstraction you get to, or sort of the highest, is the algorithms, and that's what applies to most people. And that's kind of like what's so difficult about it. I think like you could be the most amazing React engineer ever, but you might still have trouble getting passed around, or like a leak code. And you could be the most amazing leak code ever, but you won't be able to center a div. And like it's just funny, right? Like,
what do you think about boot camps then? Because then those are like specifically designed to take people from not knowing how to code to in 6 months passing like a round at Google.
Yeah, 100%. So there are certain boot camps tailored towards certain reasons. Like,
I did the Kent C. Dodds one that you had told me about, right? And that taught me.
Yeah, that one is amazing, dude.
That taught me like a lot about like coding, like the React Native, React JS, all that. Yeah,
it's because programming has changed so much. Like now today, it's like you could have a career as a React developer alone, you know? Yeah. And that just wasn't, I don't think that was like such a big thing, maybe even 5 years ago. And that's why I think boot camps, like it just depends on which one you're at. Like certain boot camps will tailor their learnings toward maybe full stack web development, because they're partnered with startups that want full stack web developers. But certain boot camps are like, we're going to get you into big tech. You're going to go to FANG. Those boot camps may be more tailored towards algorithms. And I think it's just as simple as that, right? It's like each boot camp has a theme, and those themes correspond directly to where you end up working. And especially if you're working at startup, scale up, big tech, like all different skill sets that need different things. And like, I think that's like why, like, you know, especially if you're a React engineer, if you're living around here and you do React, like you're not going to have trouble finding a job.
True.
Because you're in this early stage founder game everywhere.
Yeah.
But like, you know, it just depends on where you're at, because if you know algorithms, like you might not be that effective at an early stage startup. I mean, you just have to, like, you're an amazingly smart guy, but you're going to need a couple of months to potentially just like ramp up on like web development, right? It's just like there's so many different sectors of programming now to where we might actually start seeing, like maybe in a couple of years, if college doesn't die down, like we might start seeing like major in web development as opposed to major in software engineering, right? And it's like, it'll just continue abstracting. I wonder if that's what happened with medicine, right? Like at the beginning, like, cause like medicine has so many different counterparts. And I wonder if like at the beginning of the world doing medicine, it was just simply like learn how to heal like these 3 diseases. Yeah. And then eventually expanded to learn how to heal the heart, learn how to heal the brain. That's how I look at coding. Like,
interesting.
You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, learn how to code anything, algorithms. Okay. No, specialize in just coding websites, specialize in just doing mobile. And that's what it is. Like mobile, for example, is a whole different world. Like I would not know what to do with mobile. I have done a little bit of mobile.
Really?
Like,
so it's that different from...
I think so. It's just a complete, like it's different release cycles. Like, and that's kind of what I'm sort of playing out. Like even now when you like, God, if you're on an ML team, like nothing I'm saying might apply.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm touching on, right?
Web3 too? Like Web3, I assume, is totally different.
Yeah, Web3 is what I think popularized all this client side stuff, because Web3 is super, like, the whole point of Web3 is that your database is the blockchain, right? So you just can write pretty full-fledged apps in just using a client side language like React. And so like that's what kind of made React, I think, even more popular than it already is.
So I think that's a good segue. I want to end off on a rapid fire section.
Cool.
Okay.
Let's hit it.
The first one is going to be, what's the best engineering advice you've ever gotten?
That's a good one. All right, I got to think about that. It's definitely advice I'm giving other people. So I'm just trying to think of what I would say to somebody. I think for me, it's learning to let go of whatever you think the answer is. I think it's really important to an engineer. It's like if you spend a day trying out a certain build, you should be ready to throw that build out. Like that's like, I think the thing that slows people the most down. It's like, oh, I already worked 6 hours on this. I got to get it working. It's like, no, bro, you don't. Like you could just throw it out and get it working in 2 hours. It's fine. And that's what I think. That's like the best engineering advice. Like stop being attached to your answers, because you're probably wrong, right? Like that's what it is. Like why would you be right? Like it's a new technology.
Why would you be right?
Why would you be right?
No, but really, it's like this is a new technology. This is a new sector of the world. You're like, I mean, unless you're freaking a 20-year-old tenured programmer, you're probably gonna make mistakes. So it's like start thinking like that as opposed to thinking I'm right and I got to full send this approach.
True.
Right?
Okay. What's the worst engineering advice you've ever gotten?
What's the worst advice? That's a tough one. I don't like the worst. I don't know if everybody's ever given me intentionally bad advice, but I'd say like, yeah, I mean, it's the opposite of what I just said, where it's like, it's sort of like it's going into a room full of engineers and pitching something is 100% the way to go. That's almost never the case in engineering. And engineering is almost always a rational reason to go every which way. And it ends up being like your priorities that end up switching the decision, not necessarily whether it's right or wrong. So I'd say like, if you want to shoot yourself in the foot, you'd walk into an engineering conversation thinking your solution is actually the only solution. That's probably how you shoot yourself in the foot.
Interesting. I've been to your like little mini library in your apartment.
Yeah.
Best book you've ever read?
Favorite book. Yeah, that's a good one. Favorite book is High Growth Handbook. It's a Stripe Press book.
Yeah.
I definitely love that book. I found myself going back to it a lot. And I love that it's interview driven.
What's a one line that describes how you want to be remembered?
Can I answer for him? I already know the answer.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Honor roll.
Put me on the honor roll.
Put him on the board, man. Just get him on the board.
I'd say, what did you say? One line?
Yeah.
One line for the best.
How you want to be remembered.
How you want to be remembered?
On the tombstone, right? Is that what you're getting at? Like
It was a little less morbid than that.
Yeah. I think I want to be remembered through like people who knew me. I don't think I actually want to be remembered like directly. I think I want to be remembered for what I've done. I want that to be remembered. I don't think I'm necessarily that obsessed with being remembered personally. Like I'd much rather be remembered through people and through just a legacy that lives on, like a message that somehow lives on to people and empowers people forever. But like, I don't think I want to be remembered like Ali Alobaidi, the great whatever. I think it's more like whatever I end up freaking doing, that and how that changed everybody's like the line to be remembered. That's what ends up really, expanding past life. I mean, that's what I think is too. People get forgotten, it's okay.
You know what I could see you doing long term, what your end game is? You're going to create something that combines tech and creativity for kids. So you're going to have a school. It could be a school.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but you'll have it where it's like you can start them at like 10.
Yeah.
And then you'll find a way to combine. What I'm saying is you'll find a way to combine what you love about music and what you love about tech.
That's actually a pretty beautiful idea.
I thought you were going to say some really
I feel like
He's already pivoting.
No, but like, I feel like when you say that, like, honestly, like, I feel like you've really heard everything I've said this past hour and a half, because like I love teaching and I'm really, passionate about our education. I really think education has a long way to go.
Yeah.
I just don't think about that because I think like maybe later, like, you know, like I don't think I'm ready to attack that issue right now. But I want to so bad. So that's awesome.
He was going to say, I love kids. He caught himself.
Yeah, I know. Don't worry.
That's the out of pocket.
I love education and teaching.
Yeah, just I love teaching. Like, couldn't
If you need speech writers, we got you.
Yeah, I'd love to do.
He got you. Keep me away from this. All right, where can people find you and Napoleon online?
So you can find us on our website, which is you go to kanopylabs.com. That's KANOPY labs.com. You could also find me on Twitter as Ali Alobaidi.
You got to get that Twitter going this year.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, honestly, that's the problem. You can't really find us that many places. We're so early.
Yeah.
But soon.
I feel like you'd kill the threads, like writing like the Twitter threads in your own way.
That's something like I always see them. I'm like, I wish I was one of those guys that wrote them. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
All right, well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. If you liked it, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, comment, all the YouTube things. We will see you next week. Peace.